taxpayers' money. And I just thank you that we could come together this afternoon in this free country to be able to exercise the government that we have. And I ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'd like to call to order our workshop meeting today, July 21st, 2015. I'd like to welcome the folks in the audience. Thank you for taking your time out of your schedule today to attend this workshop. This workshop is going to be our opportunity as your elected representatives to collaborate openly and to make decisions that will decide the future direction of our public schools and the education of our children here in Clay County. In this workshop, there will be an opportunity for the audience to ask questions after we get done with the presentation. And so when that time comes, I'll ask if anybody has any questions. And certainly your participation is welcomed and appreciated. And so with that, our first workshop item is presentation of survey data from the Florida Association of District School Superintendents. Mr. Broski.
Before we begin, point of order, Madam Chair. I would just like to say for the record, I had requested public records request 5 months ago, billing information, and I've yet to receive the detailed billing that I would like to have had. I feel that I am not informed fully, neither of the rest of the board, and I don't feel that any of us are truly informed to be able to make a decision as to what direction we should go with our legal services at this point, because we don't know the actual cost of what everything is. I know we've gotten selective items that the district felt that they should release, but they did not comply with my full public records request, and I want that in the record. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Noted. Okay, Mr. Broski.
Good afternoon. Some of you may know, may not know, I'm a history teacher. Before I became an administrator, I went back and kind of researched this issue of legal services in our district. And interestingly enough, this very same issue was January of 2000 that the board was in fact talking about this very same issue. And my goal today is just to provide some information for the board then to generate discussion on what to do about legal services. So what I'd like to do today is just provide information relevant to legal services, describe the current state of legal services in our district, where we are now, what services are being provided currently, as well as the cost of a full-time board attorney in relation to a part-time flat rate attorney, the cost that we absorbed last year for legal fees, as well as compare other school districts and what they do for legal services with a focus on medium-sized districts, because I think what you're going to see.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. Andrew, is it possible that you could lower that screen in the front there so we could get the view up there? Thank you. Sorry about that.
I think that what you're going to see is that legal services range from, I think one district was $1.2 million that they spent on legal services on down to an even smaller amount. And sometimes legal services are a product of what's actually happening in the district at the time, and I'll kind of share that with you. Right now, our current, might be warming up there, misstuttered. Our current board attorney, Mr. Sykes, is a fixed rate attorney. The total cost is approximately $90,000 a year. That's derived from $7,500 a month, which is $6,000 in compensation for Mr. Sykes and $1,500 for his assistant. Current board attorney provides legal advice in all areas with the exception of personal injury, workman's compensation, and labor issues, which has always been the norm even when we had a full-time attorney. The current board attorney meets all job responsibilities listed on the job description for the full-time attorney. In other words, he's doing the work of a full-time attorney based on the job description previously written in '05. So the cost is essentially $90,000 a year, and I asked Ms. Legutko to come up with the approximate cost for Mr. Bickner in his last year, which was $230,000. I do have a detailed analysis of that if the board would like that,
I'd like to see
as to
that.
how that,
Yes.
that number had come up.
Can you speak into the mic?
The third legal area that the current attorney doesn't cover, it was workman's comp, labor, and what was the other?
ESC? Is it ESC? Oh,
Personal injury.
Personal injury.
I'm sorry.
I've been handling the ESC issues.
I'm sorry.
Basically, I am covering, there's a small claims litigation I'm handling right now, but for the most part, personal injury I'm not covering, HR I'm not covering labor law, ADA, that kind of things. I am handling the ESC cases with Mrs. Ross. With contracts, I'm not redrafting the contracts. I'm sitting with Nancy Racine and I go over the contracts. And we've developed a form now where we have a checklist that has streamlined the system now where all the different divisions follow the same procedures on all contracts, all bids, all purchases, everything like that. And it has a clearing from the contracts, from risk assessment, and from the attorney's office.
So basically, the breakdown there you can see is, $7,500. You see that at the top, what you're seeing there is the actual cost the first month Mr. Sykes joined us, and then eventually he lowered his rate to the current rate, which is $7,500 a month. That's $6,000 for him, and $1,500 for the assistant, making $7,500. If you prorate that over 12 months, that's where you see that $90,000 figure come to. And then at the middle of the page, you can see the annual salary of the previous school board attorney, their benefits, their salary with benefits, the assistant, the other fees that were associated within that contract with the previous board attorney, for a total of $230,000. So at the very bottom of the page, you can see that when you do the math, it's 90 versus 230, so that's a difference of 140, which is how that was calculated to come up with that cost.
Where do I see the 140 at? Oh, got it.
At the very bottom,
Sorry,
it's
just
just
needed
taking
to
the
focus my lenses. Got
just
it.
taking the 230 and the 90 and doing the subtraction for a difference of 140 per year.
So the $230,493 under the previous school board attorney, did that include all the outside services that we paid? It didn't include that.
Neither one of those would include.
Correct.
any
So this is
outside
just salaries and benefits and things that we paid for the contract.
Comparison of both attorneys.
Okay.
One under a flat fixed rate,
Mhm.
one under the board contract.
Okay. Thank you.
Which was also a fixed rate. It was a
Right.
salary for the full year, so it's also a fixed rate. Something else I'd like to point out, and I don't mean to interrupt you, Mr. Brodsky, but when Mr. Bickner first came on, or prior to him, and Mrs. Studdard and Mr. Van Zandt probably will know this better than I, and there was a part-time attorney, we did not pay for the part-time attorney's secretary, because the part-time attorney had a practice of his own. The additional work that he had, his secretary did. So this also seems to me like, if we're really looking to cut costs everywhere we want to cut costs, we should never have been paying for Mr. Sykes' secretary at all. I think that should have just come under as his office staff, instead of, an extra $1,500. And what was it originally? Was it $3,000 a month? Because that's what Mrs. Gaston was receiving, Ms. Gaston was receiving that, so it seemed like the majority of the board went along with that, but that really should never have been. Thank you.
Yeah, originally it was 3,000, then it was reduced to 15.
Right, but that's what we were paying a full-time secretary, the
Right.
3,000, not a part-time secretary of somebody who already had an established practice, who was coming on part-time. We shouldn't be paying for his office overhead. So,
Any other questions about the cost itself or the cost difference there?
Mm-mm. Not for me.
Okay, I'm going to pass out to you the results of a survey that was done. This is all districts in the state of Florida. And then I'm going to pass one that just hones in on the medium-sized districts similar to Clay.
Thank you.
Is there a second? Is there a second thing, or we just did?
Yeah, I'm going to pass another one out now that only separates the medium-sized districts out, because I think the data that you have in front of you, this would be a more accurate comparison. Some districts are much larger than our district, et cetera. We're much smaller than our district. Okay.
Thank you.
So the second sheet is the exact same information except taking out just the medium-sized districts. So when you look through there, we asked districts to provide information about whether they were small, medium, or large districts, whether they had a full-time or part-time attorney for legal services. And we also asked them whether they paid at an hourly rate or a flat rate. Is the attorney on an annual contract? Try to specify the contract year. Exactly how much, and then what they pay for all legal services. Then that last column is what do they have to contract out for other services. And interestingly enough, when you look at all of those medium-sized districts, they all contract out for something else. Okay, especially the labor HR stuff is all contracted out, which is the norm and is the norm for our district also. So when you look through there, you can see the amount that we're paying in legal services is lower than most districts that are out there, especially only having a flat rate of a part-time attorney.
In Hernando County, in that column all the way to the right, it says we are an NEFEC district. What is that? What is NEFEC? Okay.
My favorite one is the one that's asked how much they pay the attorney, and they say hourly / too much.
I saw that, yeah.
That was my favorite one. It was it wasn't Okaloosa. It was Martin. Yeah.
Do you have documentation as to what we have spent on outside legal services?
I do.
Are you getting to that, or am I just jumping ahead?
Again, outside legal services for Johns Eastern, which does our risk management liability.
Do you have a paper?
I don't have a paper, but I can provide you
so
this.
we'll write it,
this.
okay.
Nancy Racine put this together, and she calculated it from April 1st, 2014 through May 2015, which means it's more than a year by a month. But she had already had this documentation put together.
Okay, so Johns Eastern is what?
47,000 roughly.
And what else?
We had the HR attorney for that time frame was 17,700 roughly.
Who is that?
That's Buchanan, Ingersoll, and Rooney, that later became Fowler White Boggs. They had
Okay. They were Fowler White
or
first.
or vice
right.
versa. Yeah.
Buchanan, whatever's the new name.
Buchanan, Ingersoll, and Rooney,
Yeah.
and that was 17,700 roughly for that same time frame.
Right.
Now keep in mind, depending on what's going on, the year before we had a couple of high-profile discipline cases,
I remember.
as well as some arbitrations and some other stuff that happened, and that year that ballooned up to, 140 something.
I was
believe.
thinking 17.7 sounds awfully low, but the
Yes.
140.
So it was a great year in HR. Let's keep it
Yeah.
up.
But
Let's hope for another good year and everybody behave themselves.
But the year before was 140,000.
More than 140,000.
Just
I
for
remember sitting in on some of those things on the. It got.
I'm hoping for
It
a
was involved,
17.7
yeah.
year myself.
So is this it for this time frame, or is there any more?
That's it for that time frame.
Mhm.
There was the legal action by the board in the dispute with Sniffen and Spellman, which was
Right.
different.
Mhm.
Well, that was kind of a one-time thing.
Mhm.
Right.
And that was what, 25K?
That was $52,000.
52,000.
25 was the legal fees that we had to pay when the superintendent was going to take the board to court.
Okay.
And that was it for that time frame. But again, it varies depending on what happens during that given year.
That's right. And there's no way of really knowing what's been farmed out to any greater or lesser degree than had been done previously.
No, ma'am.
That's kind of one of those things we don't really know.
I wouldn't really know that the same way that when it comes to the labor attorneys, obviously a less volume there.
Right. So it just, there's a lot that we don't know, but that you can't produce. I mean, it's,
But I think in my opinion, I think the important thing is that you're never going to be able to know what's going to come at you year to year in terms of outside legal services or the HR stuff. You're never going to be able to know that. I think something to budget for. I noticed in here they asked the question, how much do you typically budget for that kind of stuff? And I think we budget for it. But what we do know is we do know what we're paying for an attorney. And that's really what it boils down to, because
I think you're misunderstanding, though. What they're budgeting is just salary, I believe, not the risk management costs.
yeah, and that could be, and I'll certainly get clarification on that. But
But it does say total
Yeah.
amount.
total amount budgeted, yeah, which would include salary plus all the outside. That's the way I read it, anyway.
Mr. Brodsky, is this budgeted, is this salary and benefits, or is this the risk management amounts also? Mhm.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay,
for
they
Clay
just-
County, that's just salary and benefits, correct? The $230 that's there? Correct.
Can I
So
just
I would
clarify
think
this
that-
for
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
group on the survey?
Yeah.
Through FADS, just like FSBA, I have a mechanism where I can send one of the secretarial staff at FADS a list of questions and ask her to poll all 67 districts. So I sent the questions that you see along the top, and 40-something districts answered. And just like the guy that said too much, I mean, the clarity and exactness varies.
Okay.
And so we got back what the other superintendents either took time to fill out and kind of how they said it.
So anyway, back to my point, I think, again, we're never going to know what kind of cost we're dealing with on the outside stuff, but at least with what we're paying for the attorney, that's where I think we can achieve some savings. That's my opinion. So I guess what I'll do is I'd like to open it for some discussion to get, I know you said you felt like you needed some more information. I know we can't do anything here, but we can have some discussion and we can talk about where you think we want to go for next steps. So I know we've had this discussion. I think this is the third time we've kind of entertained some discussion around the subject. So I'd like to hear what everybody's thoughts are, at least where you're leaning, and what your idea is for next steps. So I'll start with Betsy. You got anything you want to throw out?
I don't. I appreciate the information here, and I think for me it just goes back to, especially after last week's budget workshop, and just really thinking about that in the past 5 days, that whether what we would want to do in utopia and what we can afford to do, I think are two different things, or maybe not. But we are where we are, and I haven't yet heard any legal services that are not being provided with the current costs that we are paying out. And I recognize that the $17,000 for the human resources is significantly lower than it was the year prior, where there were issues. And so somewhere in the, if you use one as a low and one as a high, somewhere in the middle was probably where an average would be. And so you know, if you combine that with the $47,000 with Johns Eastern, which is 13 months, then we're roughly at $85,000 to $100,000 in outside legal services. It still looks significantly less than we paid in the past with the full-time attorney. And I guess I would just say that, you know, as I said in our April special meeting, we have asked our senior staff to be creative and innovative and combine things and try some new things, and I think that we've got to be willing to be innovative as well, given our current budget state.
Okay.
Well, I guess I'll go next. Well, I think we all know I would prefer to have a full-time attorney. I'm going to use an expression that you've used before, Ms. McKinnon and Ms. Studdard. Is it a need or is it a want? And I think it's really important that it's a need to have a full-time attorney and not a part-time attorney. There are so many things that come up, having talked with principals, that, you know, a screaming parent at their counter because there's a custody issue going on in their reception and they can't get it, you know, they need to have an attorney call them back immediately. And granted, a full-time attorney sometimes might be doing depositions or something, but I would imagine that the majority of the time he or she is available. There's so many issues that come up. You know, I have a list here. It's guardian issues, homeless children, McKinney-Venue issues, which are unaccompanied minor children, custody issues, surrogate parents, court order interpretations, you know, record subpoenas, appearance for subpoenas. There's so many things. Public records requests, gay rights issues, student safety. There's so many 504 and student disabilities, things that come up that have to be handled, that I think it's really important that we actually have somebody down at the district office who's available for that phone call, whether it be a guidance counselor, a principal, a teacher, an ESE question. I feel very strongly that we need to have somebody full-time. And I think they're worth every penny that we were paying our previous attorney. You know, we talk about wanting to cut costs everywhere, but last month Month before, we created a new assistant superintendent for $8,000, and we made a director 2, a director 1 for another $7,000, and then we took the assistant superintendent's secretary and enriched her salary by $2,500. And there's many more things that have gone on, and I know the district's going to say, well, we've eliminated positions, and if we were really truly about saving every penny, we would have, yes, eliminated those positions, distributed the work, and not enriched anybody else's salaries, especially when you look at, our teachers and our support and what they're dealing with. So it seems to me that, we're enriching certain people's positions and not something as crucial as this. I think, Mr. Van Zant, you said at the workshop we had back in May that in order for the Information Service Department to fully function, we need to have Mr. Hendricks as a assistant superintendent, and that department was functioning fine. He's doing a wonderful job, no complaints about him, and I don't think we're really, we're sitting here saying we got to save, and then we're enriching other people. So if we're going to spend money on something, we need to make sure that our legal services, that we have somebody full-time looking at every aspect of everything to protect the district, and I feel very strongly about that. So that's my take. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I haven't gotten any phone calls from anybody with negative feedback about the services we've been getting. I totally agree with you that we need availability, but I haven't heard that we haven't had it. So I understand that concern, and if it became an issue at a certain point, I think we could look at the necessity of having a full-time attorney at that point. But up until now, what we're doing is working, and it's saving us money. So I don't see, the need for a change if it's been working. And from what I've heard from district staff and principals is that Mr. Sykes has made himself readily available. Now, like you said, nobody's available 24/7 every minute of the day, but I haven't heard anybody say that it's taken him longer than 24 hours to get back with them on whatever the issue may be, which I think is reasonable. And
Not when you have, I don't mean to interrupt you, but think about when you have somebody at your front reception irate, and you need help right then and there. That's my issue with it.
Right.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
I
and I
apologize.
understand that, 100% I understand that, but I'm not sure that making this a full-time position will ensure that that attorney is going to pick up the phone every single time you call. I mean, people are out of the office. Nobody is available every minute, every second of the day. So anyway, that's kind of my take on it, and I'll echo what you all said about our budget. I, in my mind, can't justify that added expense unless it proves itself necessary down the road. I would be interested in hearing from Ms. Legutko if she has an opinion, since she's our budget expert, on what we can afford as far as attorney and legal services fees go, what your opinion would be over the overall picture. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you want to share now or later, I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are.
If I could just jump in, if you want to speak now, that's fine, but I think since we're not going to be making any kind of a decision right now, I think she's probably going to cover that. In fact, I thought we were initially going to have the budget workshop first so we could get all of the monetary information in order before we talked about this. But I'm hoping that will be part of the discussion when we talk about the budget. But certainly if you're prepared and you want to speak to that now, that's entirely up to you, Ms. Legutko. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. She wanted to know if she could address it at the budget workshop, so yeah. Okay.
Okay, my turn.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sitting here thinking, we went through this, I believe Mr. Brodsky said, in January of 2000. Mm-hmm. At that point, weren't you on the board, Mr. Van Zant? And I was on the board. So this is like deja vu. We discussed at length because we had Mr. Scrooby for years and years and years. He was the grandfather of school board attorneys. And Mr. Van Zandt and I and the other three who were on the board discussed this ad nauseum, at length, that we felt that it was the district, and I don't know how large the district was at that time. In '92, it was about half this size. So it was getting to be. I can't pull a number out of the top of my head of what our enrollment was at the time or how many employees we had, but the board felt very strongly in 2000 that we had reached the point where we needed a full-time school board attorney. Look at the county commissioners. I believe they have 2 attorneys full-time. We are the largest employer in Clay County. I thought, I wonder how the county commissioners would work if they had hire an outside firm or.
Actually, they do hire outside.
Well, I'm sure there's some
yeah.
types of law, Ms. McKinnon, that they do resource out, because obviously one person isn't going to handle all of the different, and they handle some different things than education law. But at the time, and I wish I had known the January of 2000, I would have gone back and tried to go back and look and see what was said and why, and the reasons why the board in 2000 decided that it was time that we had reached this point, that we needed to have in-house counsel. I am strongly of the opinion that we need a full-time school board attorney, someone who has the time. I don't, if you hired a new person and they perhaps didn't have that much knowledge on education law, by going to conferences and networking with the other school board attorneys in the state, and they have lines of communication helping each other. It's kind of like a brotherhood. I think the first probably year, Mr. Brodsky, how long when you were researching, did you tell me that Mr. Bittner worked with Mr. Scrooby? About a year and a half? I forget how long it was. But he shadowed him, really, and had a year it was a very smooth transition, and nobody is going to know everything that they're going to be facing when they walk in the door. But he had a year to work with someone who knew it. He just had it in his head. Trying to take the personalities out of it, I feel like with the Ms. Carrick has brought out some of the points on the day-to-day working out in a school and needing someone immediately, not calling downtown Jacksonville hoping that you can get someone. Also someone who is here during board meetings, who knows the players, who knows the members of the audience who tend to speak each month and perhaps have an agenda, who knows the lay of the land, knows the people, really knows the employees, knows the audience, and is here to protect this board and the school district from legal harm. You have to have complete faith in your attorney and what they render in their opinions. Unfortunately, this last few months, I am very uncomfortable with some of the opinions that I have heard, and I don't want to get into personalities, but I'll be happy to share that with you. But I think that this district has gone far beyond just hiring an outside firm. I was looking at some of these counties. I wish we had this, earlier, but I know you were working to get it up. But now, like Collier County, that's Naples. That's probably the richest town in the United States per capita. I know the first year I was married, I lived there, and that's what they told me. This is the richest town in the United States per capita. This is where all the corporate heads had their fancy homes. I mean, they have got money out the yin-yang down there, so they could pay whatever they want to, and they do. They pay quite well. Then you look at Escambia with 42,000. They pay 175 an hour. They don't list a total there. Let me look on down here to some of these that I was looking at. Look at Lake County with 42,000. They said they paid 175. It looks like
That's
I would
an hourly
assume that's
rate,
an
yeah.
hourly rate. And then they've got 325 is in the budget. Last year we spent 306. Well, I was looking even at what you said it was 230 that we had paid Mr. Bickner, and did that include Sabrina too? Okay. Even the year before, when everything went crazy and we had some really serious HR things, when we spent the 140, that total would have been like 370. And that, if you'll look down, that puts us, in the ballpark with districts that are more in the area that we are. I don't think that we are overspending on legal services, and I think that we have been kept safe legally. We haven't been sued and had someone come out against us. We have been protected. We've had good legal advice, and I count on that, because there's the worst thing that can happen for this district is that we wind up getting someone who's maybe not real checked out on it, and we get some bad legal advice. You may save $50,000, but sometimes, there's a saying, cutting off your nose to spite your face. I don't want you to think long and hard about it. I'm only one of 5 board members, but if I had my preference, I would put an RFP out and advertise for legal services and do like we did before. I think we brought in maybe 4 or 5 who we interviewed in depth, and really the board members really got to talk to them and get a feel for it, and we found what we thought was a good fit, and I prefer to do that. I'm listening to what y'all say, and I can see, you're going to save 50,000 or whatever. I don't even know how much the difference was, but are you really going to be saving? Because in my heart of hearts, I think sometimes that things were handled in-house and didn't have to go out, that are now going out, and there's no way to put a number on that. But I suspect more things will be going to an outside attorney than would if we had an in-house attorney who can there are just so many things they can just handle that don't need to go to the outside attorney. Now, labor attorneys, the workers' comp, we're going to spend that no matter what we do for legal services. They're specialists in that area. But as far as a school board attorney, I kind of like having someone who Mr. Van Zant or the board members or staff members or the principals can pick up the phone and call them, and they don't have to explain, well, yeah, now Ms. Roth, she is ESE. There's a difference there. And I say again, think about the county commission. They're sitting there with 2 attorneys, and I don't know what they make, but I think they spend a whole lot on legal services
More
over
than
there.
ours.
But it's the majority rules. But I'm just telling you, sometimes looking like you're saving a few dollars is not really saving, and you're not. The worst thing is, it's not, to me, the money, and the money's important, but we need to have good, sound legal representation.
Okay.
And that's my biggest concern, is that we have someone who knows what they're doing.
Okay. All right.
So there's no way for us to know if we are farming more cases out now than we did? 'Cause that's what I'm understanding.
Well, I had requested
No, we-
that, but we haven't seen
We
it.
sent you guys everything that we possibly could over, I think, a year's period of time. It was a substantial packet. I think we gave you all a printed out copy. Mr. Sykes addressed the public record request in an email. He's addressed it here on record. if you guys would like to come and look at actual bills, you may, but we've given you guys everything we can in public records that exist without this board taking further action to release records of things that are currently pending. And at the chair's pleasure, if Mr. Sykes needs to clarify once again, you know, he could do that at your discretion. But we know what we've quote farmed out and what we haven't, and really that depends, like all of you have said, like Ms. Studdard just said, based on what happens in terms of employee discipline, slips, trips, and falls. That really doesn't vary depending on who or how often the school board's attorney is or how often they're in the office. That cost varies depending on situations beyond our control.
Mr. Van Zant's right. I agree with that. Like you said, Ms. McKinnon, that's going to change year to year. And so really, we need to decide, do we want a full-time attorney? Do we want
Yeah, so I'd like to share my opinion if I could. All you guys had an opportunity. So, you know, just basically getting a chance to look at this and then going back and reviewing the information that Mr. Sykes gave us before, basically reviewing the board meeting where we had some of our staff come forward and talk about, you know, the services that they had, you know, that they've gotten. I am inclined to believe that the part-time services that we're getting right now, I think are efficient. I think that they are satisfactory. I am inclined to believe that we had a full-time attorney before, and I think that that full-time attorney had a lot of time on his hands, and I am not. I do not want to go back and revisit those things. But I will say I didn't get the best service from that attorney. And I can recall a request that took 23 days to get a response to. And I had also heard the same kind of, now again, all I'm saying is that I think with the services that we've been getting for the past, 6-7 months, under the current model, I think are sufficient. And I think they're providing a savings for us. So my opinion and my position is that I think that we go forward, we do an advertisement searching for a part-time attorney at a flat rate, because I think that proves to be the best model, at a flat rate, and we can discuss further what we think that flat rate should be. I think that we have to, whatever that rate is, it has to be sufficient to draw the kind of attorney that is going to provide what Ms. Studdard and everybody agrees needs to have some experience. We can't have somebody come in here just cold. But again, I think that the 20 to 30 hours a week, I think it's been sufficient. I haven't, like Ms. Gilhausen said, I haven't heard a peep about staff members or anybody from the public or anybody not being satisfied with the services that we're getting. And if I could just add, Mrs. Studdard, you referred back to 2000 when you guys were having this. I actually pulled up did some digging back in history and actually pulled up some emails, got some emails of when Mr. Bickner was originally hired and Mr. Scrooby and all of that stuff. And I think the times were very different back then. Back in 2000, this district had a very large fund balance, and they could afford to pay for a full-time attorney. And yeah, we are a much larger district today, but we don't have the fund balance. And I think that even goes more to the argument of why we need to try to cut some costs here. I certainly don't want to cut quality, and I certainly don't want to cut ourselves short. But if there's an opportunity, and the other thing that I would say is that we could do it on an annual contract. So if we discover, if we have a bad year and we say, you know what, then in a year, we can change it. There's nothing that says that we can't change and go back. But I think that if there's an opportunity to have a savings, I think that we need to do it, especially in light of where we are with our fund balance. And $140,000 savings is substantial. Again, I don't know, what we would all agree would be a good flat rate, but that's my position. My position is that we go and advertise for a part-time attorney at a flat rate, and we continue with the model that we're going now.
I'd like to point out that on this survey, only 1/3 of the districts our size, and I think Putnam is a wannabe middle-sized district. I don't know how they made the list at 10,000 students, but so if you pull them out, it's still, only just a little over 1/3 of the districts have in-house counsel, and notably St. John's is not one of them. And we all received, I would imagine we all received, I can't remember looking at the distribution, but Virginia Collins, who has spoken to this board on numerous occasions, sent us all an email asking us to do it like St. John's does. And interestingly enough, they contract out their ESE and HR, they say. But at any rate, the ones who have full-time that answered, we don't know if Bay at $275, if that's $275,000 or $275 an hour. Collier is $182. Escambia, we don't know, $175 or $175 an hour. And then Indian River, I did the math on that one. They come out to $264,000 plus travel and copying fees, and then $170 an hour for litigation on top of that. And then the Marion County is, I guess they don't really know what they pay their attorney. It's somewhere between $88,000 and $101,000. So it intrigues me that other districts have not chosen to have a full-time attorney, and I don't know how we would know why they haven't chosen that without going and doing a lot of watching of their board meetings and things like that. But it's certainly I don't know what that, I don't know why they haven't, but I think it's significant, and I just think that going forward, in order to move the ship around, and I'll say this again in the budget workshop, we're going to have to do things differently than we have in order to move this ship and make significant changes in the direction we want to go. And then once our fund balance is restored, then we can look at things differently. But I just think we need to take them in small steps right now, and I'm not sure that I agree with Mrs. Karakis that it's a need. We were discussing, and I was the one vote against it, but when we were discussing the advertisement for Assistant Superintendent for Business Services, Mr. Van Zant presented that we would change the job description and make that job different than it ended up being. And I remember the discussion being, no, this is too important of a job. We can't do that. And I was the one vote against it, because I think we just have to do things differently, whether we want to or not, whether we would always choose to or not. We are where we are today, and it's not our money; it's the taxpayers' money. And I still haven't found where, I haven't had anyone tell me where legal services are not being provided where they should be. And the list that you read, I read the job description of our board attorney. A lot of those things are not in that job description, and I wonder, is it opening the district up actually for someone to represent our employees in some of those ways, in not representing the board but representing the employees. And I've had a number of conversations with different administrators who have different opinions on that as well. So
Okay. I think for the sake of the discussion, I want to allow everybody else to speak one more time, kind of as a follow-up. And then I think we're going to take a couple questions. I see Ms. Paiva out there waving her yellow card, so we'll let Ms. Paiva come up. She has a question. And then I'll try to get some consensus on how to go forward. Okay? So, Ms. Gilhousen, you motioned that you had something to say.
I was just curious if you guys think it would be an option to write into the contract that even though you are hired at part-time, the expectation is if your phone rings, you'll answer it, whether you're in the office or not. If you're concerned about, services not being met.
I think, Mr. Sykes.
Right now, as it stands, I had a phone call from one of the principals on the way here. My understanding is the superintendent has given my cell phone number out to all the principals. I've received phone calls from principals in the middle of the night, early in the morning, at all hours. Right now, and I think Ms. Roth talked about the last time, when I'm not available because I'm in court, they contact Menta, my paralegal, who moves heaven and earth. They find me and get hold of me, especially if there's an emergency, so I try to timely respond. So especially when a principal has an emergency, if I'm in court when I get a recess, I've called and I've made phone calls, and so I've been available.
But I guess
I'm not saying you haven't been.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that.
Could you write it into a
raise
contract?
that as a concern if we should go with a different attorney, so that need is covered, even if it's a part-time attorney.
Okay.
And then the other thing I was going to suggest, maybe to consider that we do, like we did a survey of the other counties, could we do a survey of our principals and ask them, has the part-time model worked for you? And it can be anonymous or,
It would have to be.
right.
Yeah.
But
Nobody's
just to
going to
get,
answer that accurately.
well, what I'm saying is I haven't gotten any phone calls. You seem to say that you have.
Spoken to two
So we're hearing two
issues.
different sorts of information, and I would rather us all have the full picture of what has
Well,
this service looked like for you at your school.
Right. Okay.
Mr. Van Zandt, is that something that's possible?
Well, I'm just thinking about the varied, there's 6 of us here, very visible people. Mr. Sykes is very visible. The assistant superintendents. John Merrill's been in his job for a year. Do I want to send out a survey and say, what do you think about support services? Because everybody's, somebody didn't get their sidewalk board or their covered walkway, or I don't know that I want to go down that road. Do you really think it would help you make a decision here? Is that going to bring us to consensus?
I don't think you'll get accurate answers back, so I think you'll
Okay.
be wasting staff's time. I think, people are not going to say what they're really thinking when their name's attached to it or there's some link to it, because, it's happened before. So I
Okay.
think that's probably staff just spinning their wheels, and, we're going to get something back that's glowing because nobody wants to be the one to say they're not happy with the model that we're currently using.
Okay.
That's my take on it.
Okay. Did you have
I do have
anything?
something else
Okay.
I'd like to say, and I was listening to what you said, Ms. McKinnon, and you used the word sufficient and satisfactory, and I think when it comes to our legal services, that shouldn't be satisfactory. We should have the best legal services to represent everyone in this district, and we might be saving, I think the number Mr. Brodsky said was $140,000. Well, we all know that there are lawsuits that can amount to a much greater amount than that. And, I think it's crucial that this not be the one spot that we look to save and skimp. And of course, the majority will go. But I did get a list of duties from the previous attorney, and it's 2 pages long of issues that come up that may not be every day, but do come up in the course of a week or a month that need to be addressed.
Can you
whether-
provide us a copy of
Oh,
that?
I would make, yeah,
Okay.
actually, if Miss
I don't think the copy machine's working
copies,
right now, but
we can
we
get
try
her
yeah.
to,
But if you
you know,
could, if you
yeah,
scan it and email it, that would be
absolutely.
great.
But there's so many things in here that I read that I didn't even realize were things that he dealt with, and I'm sure Mr. Sykes is capable of dealing with all of these and probably has dealt with quite a few of these already. But I just think if we hire a part-time attorney, it's somebody who has a private practice, who has other issues. The School Board of Clay County is not their number one priority. It's one of their priorities, but it's not their number one. And they may have something that's more pressing that they have to devote their time to, which is why I feel strongly that an in-house is the way that we should go. And it's a model that, in 2000 when this district was growing, and I wish we did know the size of the district at that time. But I would imagine we were probably in the 20,000 range. It's a guess. Anybody know? Is it more or less 16,000? Yeah, I don't know, but I would think that we've probably doubled in size since then. And I think this is the one area I don't think we should skimp on.
Okay.
And I'm not, I'm not going to get into the personalities either. Mr. Sykes has done a fine job. I don't want to go into anything. I just feel strong that if we're looking at a model, that's the model, and I feel it's worth every penny.
Do you think that we could try a part-time for a year and then revisit, if we could agree that we revisit it after a year, that we will revisit it after a year? Would that?
I don't want to be difficult. I'm good at being difficult. We know that, but I
I'm
don't
trying to find
want
a compromise here. I'm trying to say if we could
honest
try
with
it
you,
for a year and see how we
here's
do.
the thing, the majority will vote and do what we think, but I feel strong that would be an avenue I would not want to take.
Okay.
I would really want to go with a full-time, because truthfully, the last 6 months, we're fortunate that nothing has come up that has been an issue, and that Mr. Sykes has made himself as available as he has. But I do think, there's probably a lot of times where the schools or ESC has had to wait on him getting back to them. And no fault of his, because, he has returned their calls and he's doing what he's supposed to. But if we had an in-house, it would be, a much quicker response, and he would be available. ESE hearings, depositions, the attorney goes in when the employees have to have a deposition, he's there with them. Because when he's not representing us, he's representing the district and the superintendent and the rest. So I think that's the way that I feel we need to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Studdard, your turn.
I don't have anything
Okay.
else to say.
All right, great.
Said
Okay,
what I
so
had to say.
everybody's good. At this time, I want to, Ms. Paiva, did you have a question? You get to ask a question. Okay, so just so you understand, it's a workshop, and so you're only allowed to ask questions.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
Okay.
It's questions that I have.
Okay.
I am concerned. My question, I guess I don't know how to phrase this, because I hear principal, but I can tell you where the teachers are, and you haven't received calls. I'll make sure you do, because we do have teachers that have been subpoenaed and teachers who have to be given deposition and have not had any advice in the current
Okay,
situation.
Mrs. Paiva, if you have a question, you can ask a question. but-
Okay.
Okay.
Under the
I don't wanna be
system you're
rude,
going
but
to
that's
do,
the-
if
that's
you're
the
going to
rule.
do the system you're going to do, are teachers going to be allowed to call Mr. Sykes? That's a question that I do have, because I just want services,
Okay.
okay? And that's what my concern is. And I am representing the CCEA. I'm representing the teachers. And the teachers, we need to get services. Is that phone number going to be available to teachers also?
Okay.
There's my question there. My second question is, I'm concerned when I look at the counties that mirror us. And the counties that mirror us is always Leon, Oskaloosa, Santa Rosa, and St. John's. So whenever we compare apples to apples, those are the 4 counties, because they represent us. They're medium-sized counties, and they're about the same as our population. There is a huge difference, and this is my question. These counties are contracted for ESE and HR, and they have a separate attorney and separate attorney. And I just can't understand how, we're going to say that they're paying $225,000 or $309,000, but we're going to be able to have these services with a $90,000 attorney and also HR running $17,000. Is that what we're saying? HR is running
No,
at?
I think the answer to your question is the numbers that we're talking about, the 90,000, that's just the flat rate for the attorney. These services are above and beyond that, and that's even how it is with all of these districts.
Right. So the $17,000 isn't
That was
really
just
a good.
this year, yeah.
That's not a good.
You
That was
can't
a
predict
fluke.
that. Yeah, you can't
That was
predict
a
that.
fluke.
Yeah.
Okay, but I will see that you all get the telephone calls.
Okay.
Wait, can I
So
ask
to
a
answer the
question before she goes
question-
back? in the current model that we have,
Yeah.
can the teachers right now call our attorney and
May
have
I-
an answer?
Yes, Mr.
Yeah.
Sykes.
I have teachers call me whenever they want to call me. They can contact me. If they want to ask the principal's phone number, I'll talk to them, absolutely. Here's the problem, and this is the issue that's come up, and I've addressed this with the principals, and I've addressed it with a number of teachers. When teachers get subpoenaed to go to a hearing on a custody case, on a divorce case, they are not being subpoenaed as official witnesses from the school board. They're not. They're being subpoenaed as fact witnesses. As such, I cannot go in there and object. I can't say, objection to harassing. I'm not an attorney to the party, to the lawsuit. As such, I have absolutely no standing in the lawsuit. I have no ability to object. I have no ability to tell a lawyer what to do. I have no ability to make exceptions with the judge. And as I've advised them and I've told them that the bottom line of it is that the lawyer for the school board does not have the authority to do any of the things that some of these teachers are looking for. Additionally, if they had their own attorney, and let's say they went and they paid for their own attorney can't object. Their own attorney can't intercede and can't do anything in the action. So if they want to have a lawyer, essentially, and I'm not trying to be condescending at all, but if they want to have an attorney to be there to hold their hands or to answer their questions, they can do that. They can always call me. But if they want a lawyer to come in there and appear in a court proceeding, they aren't going to be able to do that, whether they pay for their own attorney or they have me do it, because in order to object in a proceeding, you have to be a counsel of record and you have to represent a party to the proceeding. If you are not a counsel of record and you are not a party to the proceeding, you can't do objections. So if they're harassing a teacher, there's nothing I can do about it in the courtroom.
So in that explanation that you just gave, does that have anything to do with your part-time or full-time status?
No,
It's
even if I was a
allowed.
full-time attorney, I would have the same answer to them,
Okay.
because, I understand Mr. Bickner would occasionally go to some of these depositions and the hearings, but at the same time, I would tell you that fundamentally, if he tried to intercede in the proceedings, I don't know why he would do it or how he would legally do it, because you cannot do it.
Okay. I understand. Okay.
Mrs. McKinnon, in the districts that Ms. Paiva pointed out that are the closest that mirror us, I'm not sure our 90,000 is off base, because St. John's says they have a $100,000 retainer, and then they say they vary. We budget an average, but they do. That retainer would come from what the law firm has decided is about what they would need. Santa Rosa says typically less than $70,000 for board attorney. We contract for other attorneys. And then Okaloosa, it's really hard to figure out because they do a $675 retainer plus $175 an hour, and they don't tell whether that's monthly or whatever. So I'm not sure that our 90,000 is off base with those others that are similar to us.
Yeah, I don't think so either. The way that I read this data, and I could be reading it wrong, but the way that I read this is the column where it says, do you pay an attorney an hourly rate or flat rate? That figure that's in there, is my understanding, is what they're paying the attorney. The column that says, do you have a total amount budgeted or typically spent annually for all legal services, that would be your attorney plus all those outside services that they budget for. But that doesn't mean that that's what they pay. They could pay more. They could pay less. I think that's just the question is, do you typically budget for legal services? And if so, I think it's intended to just give you an idea of what they might pay on an annual basis. So I would agree with you. I don't think our 90,000 is off base. So, okay. So to move forward, I just want to talk about next steps. So I'm going to propose, and we'll just try to get a consensus, okay? I would like to propose that we go out, and I don't know if the process is an RFP or if we just advertise. I don't think we have to go out with an RFP. I think we can just advertise. I got some correspondence from Mrs. Racine that she had sent me with some policy that said you don't have to go out with an RFP. I think we can just advertise, and we can advertise through the FSBA or whatever other means that there are. But I would propose that we go out with an advertisement for a part-time attorney at a flat rate of $90,000 for, I would say, for on an annual contract to be renewed every year, to be revisited. And that way, I think if we decide that first year that this isn't working, then we can go revisit it. And then, from there, we'll get some applicants. I think, depending on how many applicants we get, we'll go ahead and we'll do some interviews, and then we'll go forward from there. In the meantime, though, we'll stay with the current services that we have until we get another attorney in. So, do I have any objectors or anybody that agrees with that, or can I get any kind of consensus on that? Or if no consensus, then let's hear another idea.
I disagree.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay. Ms. Studdard?
I can count to 3.
Okay. Miss Condon, what's your...
I can live with that.
Okay. All right. So, I think what we'll do is, next steps going forward is we have a consensus by majority that we will go ahead and advertise through the FSBA. We want to do it through the FSBA. We can find out do we know what other means before we advertise
What
through?
is the attorneys, what is their affiliation
Oh,
called? No.
There's a actual
There's a
Florida
school
School
board.
Board
Yeah.
We can run
attorney,
that
yeah,
down.
we
There's
should
a
run it through that.
FSBA, there's a school board
And there's
attorney
SADS
thing.
and-
Yeah.
Yeah.
School Board Attorney
Bad.
Association.
Right.
Are you also including in that, I'm just thinking, are you also going to hire a paralegal? Are you expecting this man or woman to bring their own paralegal, or what are you going to do about that?
I think we probably need to have a paralegal, but...
Most attorneys
yeah,
have a paralegal.
most of them have one, right? So...
But our 90,000 included it.
Yes, our 90,000 included it, so I would say that we go with what we got now.
And what are you calling part-time? How many hours?
What, 20 to 30 hours, is that about
Right now, under the contract, it's up to 20 hours a week.
up to 20
Up
hours
to
a week?
20?
Okay,
Not very much.
yeah. We don't have to do, up to 20 hours a week. We could do 20 to, does 20 hours a week, is that sufficient for you, or do you typically do more? What do you?
I have never kept a billing record. There have been times where I've done more. There's been times where I've done less. I can't tell you how many exactly, but 20 hours essentially has covered my time. And I'm a multitasker. I have multiple plates going the exact same time. That's just the nature of how I operate.
Okay.
Does this work out to be, 2 days a week working?
Well, I would say
In the district.
we could say between 20 to 30 hours a week, and however they want to spread that time out. I wouldn't say you have to be there on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I would say that they'll get a feel for how they need to distribute their time. But we could say 20 to 30 hours a week distributed across the week. Unless you guys are very strong that they need to be there on a certain day or whatever, but I wouldn't think
It would
that.
have to fluctuate with what's going on in the district.
Yeah,
They need to be
absolutely. I
available.
think they
Right.
need to distribute their time equally.
Right.
Ms. Gilhousen, you were going to say something?
You covered it.
Okay, all right. Okay, did that answer your question about the paralegal? So a part-time attorney, 20 to 30 hours, with a paralegal to distribute their time.
No benefits.
I don't think we provide benefits.
And 90,000 for the attorney and the paralegal?
Yeah, that's what we're paying now. And if we don't get any takers on it, then we obviously will need to revisit it.
Right.
That's what I would say. It's a place to start. Is there anything that I have not included or anything that I've left out that we need to consider, Mr. Van Zant?
What I'll do here's what I've written down. I've written down one thing that you didn't say, but we can review some other ads. List
The
scope of work. But just nouns and verbs here. Advertisement, flat rate, part-time, 20, 30 hours a week, 90,000 all-inclusive, no benefits, and a scope of work. And I agree with what I think that we have consensus with. We're going to continue to contract out for HR, workers' comp, and personal injury, and those other things that we're covering in-house. We would like that guy to cover, so we can get with Ms. Racine, look at the old advertisement, maybe get an advertisement that another county's used, and put something together that makes this look like an intelligent body seeking
Right.
viable services. So I think we can handle that.
Do we need to bring that back to the board for us to approve before we go out with any kind of advertisement? Is that,
That's totally at your discretion. If you want us to come up with an advertisement, we will. If you want us to bring it to the board in August and approve it, we can do that.
what do you guys want to do?
I'm fine either way.
Okay, we're fine, okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If when we go out for this advertisement, if the resumes that we get back are not what we would deem as the qualifications that we'd like, are we bound to stay within what we've advertised, or can we then re-advertise?
I think at that point you revisit. It's just like anything else. You can re-advertise a job if you put out a bid for somebody to do anything, build a building, run your internet for you, and you're not comfortable. You deny all bids and do whatever you think you have to do to get that quality of service raised. So if you don't like any of what you got, we'll start over.
Okay. So the contract that we have right now with Mr. Sykes, does that provide the work of scope that we're talking about for a part-time attorney? I think it does, doesn't it? Or it does. I see him shaking his head over there, yeah. So that's a place that we could start, right? Okay. And then the current job description, we would include that, because doesn't the job description also detail the scope of work as well? Okay. Okay. All right. So with that, I think we are done here. So I will, superintendent requests.
I don't have any, thank you.
Okay. School board requests. Okay, we're all good. And we will adjourn. Okay, so we've got about 45 minutes before we start the special meeting. Oh, yeah, you can keep that.
When you were talking